All right. Thanks very much for being here and staying here. I'm already tired, which is good, because my flight is at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and at 3:30 the taxi is coming. So if I'm not long at the after party, that's because of that, and because I'm old and boring. Talking of which, if you want to have these slides, they're already online at aka fwdays. The slides will be there, the links are there, and your reactions will be published there as well. So that's the interesting one. I thought I would be clever and actually put this QR code there, and then I turned on the subtitles, so that might mess with that QR code. But okay, subtitles are more important than that. Who am I? I'm a principal software development engineer at Microsoft. Because if you get a new title after promotion, you might as well have all the names in that and get the bullshit bingo for a job title in one go. I work on Microsoft Edge and developer tooling in Microsoft, VS Code, developer tools, and I'm also a W3C member of the WebML discussion group making a new web standard on on-device machine learning, which was interesting to talk to the people on Grammarly outside what they could do with that kind of stuff. I've also been doing that for 20 years. I've been a web developer for 20 years, and the other day I saw code that I'd written in 1998, and I was embarrassed and horrid things happened there, but people paid me for it, so it was okay. I worked for eToys in America. I worked in Agilicis, which was a UK company that did McDonald's Co.uk and Visit Britain and these big enterprise content management system things. Then I worked at Yahoo on Yahoo Answers and the YUI user library, in case anybody of you remembered that one. And then I worked at Mozilla on Firefox OS and the developer tools there as well. And during that time, I also wrote 3 books on JavaScript and accessibility and CSS, and contributed to about 10 books. And I've seen some interesting things in my time over these 20 years. And that's what I want to talk about a bit today as well, that we don't repeat these kind of things. The web on Monday was 30 years old. The World Wide Web. The internet is a bit older, and these are two different things, because the internet is the network connectivity and the networking stuff, and the World Wide Web is the thing that needed a browser. So this is Tim Berners-Lee and Vint Cerf next to each other, so you see diversity was a very high thing on the web from the very beginning. It's not only white men. Oh wait, it is. But it's 30 years that we've been doing that, and it's still here. And in software, that's kind of ridiculous when you think about how many things come and go quicker and quicker now. And the web is been there for so long because of the way it was actually thought of. It's an excellent publishing medium, and that's how I discovered it. I used to be a radio journalist, a newscaster at a radio station, and then I found the internet and quit my job, got myself a laptop, built my first website, got hired by BMW to build their intranet a week later, because I was one of the 3 people in Germany that was saying he knows HTML. It's embarrassing, but that was exactly what they wanted to have. Much like nowadays you can go into any pub in San Francisco and say blockchain and people give you money. It's a low barrier to entry. Anybody can publish on the web. You can use a text editor, or you can even use developer tools built in the browser nowadays, and you can publish things on the web. And people in China, people in Africa, people in India, people on other planets probably, but they don't communicate with us, can read your thing. You don't need to ask for permission to publish anything. You don't need to go through some company and some shareholder value to actually make sure that you can publish something. And it's built on dumb and sturdy technologies and ideas. Reliability beats finesse in that kind of case. HTML is not clever, but it's so dumb it actually cannot break. And that's not a bad thing. That's really not a bad thing at all when it comes to something that should be done worldwide and for everybody out there. From the very beginning, the web was meant to be forgiving. Anyone is allowed to write code for the web, or use whatever they want to create the code. I mean, companies tried. I mean, there was this company that had a thing called Front Page that said, like, you need to buy this before you can publish on the web, or Dreamweaver, or these kind of things. But I always used whatever I had. Edit.com, then HomeSite, then TextPad++, all these kind of things that are there. The problem is that users shouldn't suffer from developer errors. User agents need to be forgiving. So when XHTML was a thing, we wanted to make HTML more organized. There was a validation of HTML that it made sure that only clean code goes to the end user, and half the web broke. More than half the web broke because people were either sloppy in developing because it just worked, or they had a third-party code in there where an ampersand wasn't properly encoded and then the website was not available. And that was not good enough. So we stood up back in ARMS back then and said, like, XHTML2 is not what the web is going to be like. HTML5 is what the web is supposed to be. Much more app-driven, much more a thing that is a full software platform and not only a document platform, and, again, forgiving. When you don't close your tags in HTML5, the browser by definition needs to close them for you. When you nest them wrongly, the browser will take them out of the wrong nesting and render them after the other one. What you put on the web will not be consumed the way you intended it to be. Your products need to be flexible. You have no control over what people use to look at your website. The same way you have no control if that person can see, hear, feel, read, understand your language. But the great thing about the stupidity of or the simpleness of the technologies that we have is that we as end users can control whatever we want to have. We can translate websites to our language. We can also use a reader mode in a browser to make sure your stupid layout with 10,000 pop-ups doesn't annoy me. I want to read the content. There's a simple reader mode in in Edge, for example, that allows you even to highlight what is an adjective, what is a verb, and to put like dots in between the words for people with dyslexia that have problems reading them. So as the technology is not as fixed as it is like in a native environment, the web can always be converted, and you cannot do anything about that. You need to be flexible about this. You need to understand that the end user on a mobile device is as important as the end user on an 800 by 600 pixel resolution presentation slide thing that I had to present on from time to time. And that ended up, to a degree, in a worldwide mess. Because the freedom meant that people took liberties. If the browser fixes it anyways, why should I understand HTML? If that automatically puts the p tag in there, then we can omit that. If the TD doesn't need the table and the T-body, that works as well. I mean, when HTML5 came out, it was like, look, in 200 bytes I can make a valid HTML page because the browser adds the rest of it to it. This was meant as a security net. This was meant as somebody making a mistake and the browser fixing it for you. But we started relying on it, and we started thinking, well, the browser fixes it anyway, so I can write whatever the hell I want and something comes out of it. As things just work, we spent years adding suboptimal products to the web. And we all know that suboptimal for developer is a word for totally messed up. These legacy products are likely to never get fixed. Nobody wants to do maintenance. That's the worst job out there, because you have to understand other people's code, you cannot play with cool new stuff, you have to basically fix other people's problems. That's not a fun thing to do. But these websites are out there. And what does that mean for us as browser makers? It means that browsers are big and slow because they need to show the web of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Every sloppy mistake we did in the past as web developers, we have to suffer, and we have to make sure, because if something doesn't render, it's always the browser's fault. The developer is infallible. That's not an issue at all. Which is good to a degree. You making mistakes, or me making mistakes as a web developer, means the browser gets better because I have edge cases that I can support, and that way I make those perform, then I make the other ones perform as well. It gets annoying though when you see how rampant that is. That is the HTTP archive. Other people have talked about that today. And that's from October 2018. 90% of the websites in that archive have 5.8 megabyte of data loaded. Probably for a hello world page, or like, welcome to our website, we make an experience here and we delight our end users rather than giving them the frigging content they came for. 4 megabyte of images, because people upload JPEGs that are uncompressed instead of a WebP image, or don't convert their images at all, or put a BMP up there because the browser also renders those. I've seen like icons this big, and when you then made them, they were like 6,000 by 6,000 pixels because it was the only image they uploaded, and then resized it in HTML or CSS. The web is made for humans. It's not made for other computers. It's not made for our business needs. End users not using your product means you don't have a product. And that's hard to swallow, but I find it fascinating because I love people. Some of my best friends are people. They're not dogs, they're better, but people are okay too. So control of the content is in the hand of the consumer. No, you cannot put pop-up images in their pop-ups in their face. They will use a pop-up blocker. No, you cannot put annoying ads on there. They will use an ad blocker. They will do whatever they can to consume the things on the web, and we should not be the people who are in their way. We build things for people to consume in a simple fashion. The easier that is, the faster I get to your content, the higher you will rank in a search engine, the more happier you will make the people out there. And we don't even think about that anymore. We just think we got to use that thing that my competitor uses. Everybody uses 5 carousels and 3 pop-ups and a notification that asks me to sign up for notifications before I even know what the hell this thing is about. We build things for people to do tasks with. Our job is to make them more effective. A web interface for me was always a thing that's better than the thing we did before. May it be a form that you had to fill out to actually get the rubbish in your house collected, or find a new electronics provider for your house, or an internet provider. The internet was always the thing where I went because it was faster than being on a telephone and talking to people or sending mail around. Humans are not in a binary state. We change over time and we have different needs. My eyesight is not as good as it was 20 years ago. Your eyesight will get bad as well. You might be drunk at one night and still want to buy something from eBay. Don't. It's a bad idea. Keep doing that. Or you learn another language and you're not proficient in the language yet, and people use clever words instead of simple words. So make sure that humans can consume your thing and you'll be happy. On the web, we should care about a few things. Accessibility. Making the thing available for everybody regardless of their physical condition and their mental condition. Interoperability, yes, it needs to work on iOS, on Android, on all desktop browsers, on old machines, and on your cat and dog and every IoT device that people might put things on. Performance, it needs to be fast. And it needs to be fast and quickly interactive. Not only there, but then when you press a button 15 times because it's still loading, that's not fun either. And security, because people are stupid. People use the same friggin' password everywhere. People are happy to give far too much information about themselves out. It's up to us to keep them safe. What we do care about is, though, and that came from the speaker dinner yesterday, time to market. We're going to be the first one on the market before the competition does it. And constant innovation. If we're not innovating the web, it's going to die. Flash will kill HTML. Silverlight will kill HTML. Java applets are much better than anything else on the planet. iOS is better, Android is better. Every single year something will kill the web, and if we don't innovate the web, we're going to fall behind. I always like it like, somebody else will eat your lunch, and then like, our company provides free lunch. And you're like, okay, he can eat it too, that's fine. The web is an accessibility mess. WebAIM, which is a resource that actually does software and testing software for accessibility, did this test the other day. 1 million pages, the biggest pages on the internet, like subnet pages, how many sub-pages they have and how much traffic they have. The biggest website on the planet, 1 million of them, and they ran it through an accessibility testing tool and see what's happening. And 85% of homepages had low contrast problems. Text that you cannot read when you're on your mobile phone and the light shines behind it, or when you have when you can't see properly, or when there is some glare in the background of your screen and these kind of things. Missing alternative text for images. We don't know what that thing is if you can't see it, and the search engine can't know what that image is about either. That's why your website is not being found. Empty links that we don't know what that link is. Missing form input labels, we don't know what we're filling out, these kind of things. And the problems are mostly caused by framework usage. And the interesting numbers are there, like frameworks that I thought were happily dead for years, but are still around, like MooTools and Knockout.js or Mustache even. And Vue.js is there, Angular is there, Prototype is there, Prototype is still there. That's something I remember from 2000. I'm like, why did we do this? And also JavaScript libraries are there, Septo, YUI, jQuery Migrate, whatever that is, Hammer.js for like doing tapping before browsers fix that for us. Moment.js is a huge one there. And they all ended up making accessibility problems because of the convenience of using these libraries and frameworks. Homepages with jQuery averaged 19.2 more errors than those without jQuery. So only the library added those mistakes, because it made it easier for us to create empty links, and the library told us like, oh, that's a valid thing, although it's a span and not a real button. 15 million detected errors, over 25% of all the accessibility errors. And it's because basic things get forgotten. We used jQuery and we used other libraries because browsers were bad. Browsers made stupid mistakes and were actually not implementing the things that we were supposed to do. This was something I wrote the other day. Basically just a banner that is absolutely positioned, and inside it's a span that is black with an RGBA, white with a RGBA background. So basically some text that shows something, and I moved it around wherever you clicked on. And then I thought, how do I hide and show this? I can do it in JavaScript, of course. I can use the jQuery plugin, or I can install React and whatever and make it hide and show. But CSS has an empty selector, and I have to stop talking now so you can see it. It basically says if the thing is empty, do a display none. Don't show the thing when there's nothing in there. And I posted that, and people are like, whoa, I didn't know it's been an empty element. You're like, yeah, since like 2004. But the fun thing then was the first answer, of course, like, yeah, it doesn't work for me because of this. If the variable is empty, it will not be empty. You're like, you know what? Yeah, because it isn't. Line breaks and white spaces is content. If you ever think about a wire and bytes going through it, your line break is content, so it's not empty for CSS. So you need to get rid of that white space, then it will be empty as well. Even better, we concentrate on the wrong things when we do something with JavaScript, when we argue online. This is great. Note inner text plus equals 1 doesn't work because it turns 0 to 0, 1, 0, 1, 1. But note inner text minus 1 works. So that gets you to 0, 1, 2. And of course, the reason is that JavaScript does interesting stuff because of the coercion behavior. 5 minus 1, so a string minus a number is 4. 5 plus 1 is a string that is 5, 1. Much like a toaster and a duck doesn't become a cow when you actually put them together and you wonder when strange things happen. Then people start discussing. I love that. There's strong typing, weak typing, and whatever the hell this is. And somebody defined it as passive-aggressive typing. And I think that's one of the best descriptions of JavaScript that I've ever seen. What's JavaScript like? It's passive-aggressive typing. You got to deal with it. It's just no way dealing anywhere around it. But nobody cared about the real problem here. Does anybody see this? You're doing a calculation on text element in the page. You're trusting whatever is in the page that is going to be the right value to do some calculation and some probably business logic on it. I have developer tools. I can mess with anything on the page. And this is an XSS vector. This is a security problem. Do not trust anything in the display. It's so much fun. You're so powerful using developer tools. I used to fly with an airline that was rather costly. You signed up for one flight. You signed up for their mile program to actually get upgrades. And the second time I went there, I realized that the miles that you have with that mile program was a global JavaScript variable. So what do? You buy yourself an economy class ticket. You give yourself 12 million air miles. You get an upgrade to business class for free. Just because they don't look at it. I've seen e-commerce websites where you have a drop-down for how many things you can order, but they don't test that value. So you actually created a new drop-down element with minus 500, and you order minus 500 things. And that causes an error in their checkout process, and most of the time they send you vouchers like, oh, I'm sorry, something went wrong on our end, so here's $200 off for your next order. Don't trust HTML. Anybody can mess around with that thing. But we keep busy with these things. We come up with these clever solutions like this -1 thing. It's easy to feel out of the loop as a JavaScript developer these days. You think these things are basic and nobody should care about them. I want to know more about the Nuxt.js, whatever thing. And I feel bad because I haven't used the thing that hasn't been invented yet. When you see these job offers that like 5-year experience in a 1-year-old technology. And we laugh about this, but it's partly our fault because we keep talking about new things all the time. Often we pad our products with solutions because we want to be seen using them as they are professional. I have people coming up to us like, oh, we have this thing running for 50 users inside our company. Should we use React? Why? because everybody cool uses React right now. Isn't that what our engineers need to learn? You're like, yeah, they can do that for something that needs React, not the thing that is actually running happily. Make them do better things with their time, give them some time off or whatever. It doesn't feel enough to build a sturdy product. It needs to be clever. Things that work and don't break are boring. Things that are basically doing amazing things and maybe work might be more interesting because you use the coolest, newest technology to do it. We overcomplicate our job requirements and block prospective talent that way. So when I see job offers that says like needs to have these 5 different framework knowledge, and I think about somebody who just starts in our market. And the cool thing about our market is anybody is allowed to be a web developer. I didn't go to university. I'm a guest lecturer at universities now. I love people that had like their first career or had like children and then want to do a job on the side being a web developer again. And they can do that. They don't need to know how to install a local server. They don't need to know how JavaScript works. They're allowed to publish cool things on the web. Everybody can do that. So let's take a break and a breath and think web. It's not about our convenience as developers or our business plans. That's cool. You know, we get paid for what we do. So a bit of pain, a bit of extra work, a bit of extra thinking before we publish something, if it's really accessible, if it's really secure, is what I expect from somebody that gets paid a lot of money to do that. Other jobs have the same thing. It's about creating content and tools for human consumption. And maybe animals, and maybe whatever you want to build your web thing for. But think about the human who uses your thing. And if these 22 meg of JavaScript because you wanted to rotate something in the background and have like some augmented reality thing going on is really worth it. The good news is that in our current environment we have a great platform for that. The web has never been better in terms of tooling. Our browsers are evergreen, our development environments are open source. So let's go a bit higher. Let's think about the basics again, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is the foundation of any web interface. No matter what you do, in the end, some HTML will be rendered out. If you can control that or not is the question. HTML elements come with lots of free accessibility and interaction features. A button element is keyboard accessible, tab accessible, screen reader accessible, and basically you can click on it as well. It has a state for being pressed, it has a state for being inactive, it has a state for being active right now, and it has a state for being not visible or disabled. This all comes for free. These are all things you don't have to think about. This is all business logic you don't have to write, or interface logic in this case that you don't have to write. What do? We put span elements in there and then use lots of JavaScript to simulate what a button would be and become inaccessible that way. Static HTML can be cached and compresses down to almost nothing. And search engines love static HTML. You can't go wrong by betting on HTML. It's an unbreakable technology. It really is as simple as it can be and not simpler. Okay, maybe text files are simpler, but they're not structured, so they don't give you any way to navigate them like HTML does. CSS allows you to style elements and give them a certain look and feel, but that's CSS 2001. CSS nowadays is a fully fledged layout engine, and with Flexbox and Grid we can actually do layouts that we never thought of in other rendering environments either. Think about Flexbox and Grid when you think about CSS, and take a look at all the resources that are out there, and I'm going to put more into those that I haven't done there yet. It's also an animation and transition engine that allows you to do performant animations because the browser performs them for you. You don't have to think about how slow or fast that thing is because the browser makes it in another thread for you and the rendering engine does it for you in the other case. Has variables and conditions, and whatever the last thing is, it can react to changes in the environment. So you see, if your CSS is about pixel perfection, you don't understand CSS. CSS should be as flexible as possible. The text should be able to resize in any way. It should allow for any content. Every time I get a navigation in HTML or in CSS that is basically in English and there's like 5 pixel space for it, I send it back after translating it into German. Because it's always twice as big, and it's like, look how it breaks if I just convert it to another language. This is not the web. JavaScript, of course, is the superpower of the web. It allows you to do everything and even creating the other two technologies. You cannot create you can create content with CSS, but you cannot create HTML with CSS. But you can create HTML with JavaScript via the DOM or via virtual DOM or whatever, or inner text or inner HTML. It can be used on the server, on the client, and in applications, and each of them which follow different rules. When Node came around, out of a sudden everybody tells me I have to write JavaScript that way. And it doesn't make sense to write JavaScript that is client-side the same way to write JavaScript that is server-side. It needs to be optimized for the environment it runs in. It puts you in control and makes you responsible for performance, maintainability, and reliability. And do you want that? Do you want to be that person that has to do all that? Because it's cool to have that kind of power. But it also gives you lots of responsibility. So it's finally standardized, but it's also fast-moving, and it's easy to lose track what's happening in the JavaScript world right now. So if you think about it, HTML, when it comes to responsibilities, the browser does most for you. The standards are there, they've been defined, they've been ratified. It's not as moving as fast as it used to be. And you have to just write the right HTML. You have to pick the right semantic element for the right job, and the rest is done by the browser. And even if you don't use them, the browser tries to fix things for you. In CSS, the browser has a lot of responsibilities as well, because it's not easy to render the things that people do nowadays with CSS. Grid layouts that are animated and within like resizing images and with a gradient background and a drop shadow to make this performant was not fun in a browser, but people have the right to do it, so we had to make it do. We had to make it happen. The standard is, of course, moving fast as well, and you have a bit of responsibility. But CSS is forgiving. If you write a syntax error in a line of CSS, it gets skipped. If you put something in there that the current environment doesn't understand, it doesn't matter. The next environment that understands it will use it. One JavaScript error and the browser says, don't want to play with you anymore, done. Go somewhere else or learn coding first, kind of thing. And this is where JavaScript comes in. You are fully responsible for everything that happens on the screen. You are fully responsible that this thing performs well, that it is accessible for people, and that it actually is indexed by a search engine because your business person wants to be found on the web as well. Which of course is great, it's a good challenge, it's fun. I love JavaScript, I wrote 3 JavaScript books. I love it to bits. But I never understood why people take that much responsibility on when they don't need to, when CSS and HTML would do the trick as well. So we live in great tooling times. We have evergreen browsers with built-in development tools that do amazing stuff. We have virtualized testing built into browsers, like in Chrome. You can simulate mobile phones, and you can simulate bad and flaky connections to make sure that your thing actually works in a real environment. We have community channels to share our code and solutions and ways to discuss our approaches. CodePen, JSBin, GitHub. We're not actually sitting alone in our basement anymore trying to buy books to understand what we're doing. Everything that we learn is shared with other people and can be learned from other people. And we have excellent up-to-date documentation, which is the Mozilla Web Docs or the MDN docs. These are not by Mozilla. These are actually written by all the players in the market. Google is a big one. Microsoft is a big person in there. Apple contributes a lot. Samsung contributes a lot. This is where you find up-to-date information. So why don't we build great solutions? Why is that crafty big thing on the web? Why is the web so slow, and why is it inaccessible? I think Stack Overflow and things like that are to blame. Whatever is like a copy and paste thing that you don't understand but gets the job done gets upvoted because you got the job done and you got your boss off your back. You don't understand what you're using, but it made you actually think that you're using it. So a lot of like bad quality code keeps getting replicated because the easiest way to do it. We're not paid to learn, we're paid to deliver. Again, first to market. The developer that creates the most is the most valuable developer for the company, not the one that writes documentation and comments, because that's for weaklings. Peer pressure makes developers who don't know things afraid to admit it. That's why I stopped asking people in the audience, have you heard of this? Because everybody will put their hand up, even if they don't, because they don't want to be seen as the person that's falling behind or doesn't know things. And there's always a good enough way to create a lot in a short amount of time. And web developers need to know a lot. If you think about it. We need to know about performance, accessibility, interoperability, security, maintainability, browser quirks, developer toolchains, browser developer tools, abstractions, the command line interface, and editors. This is all the things that you need to know as a web developer if you think about it. And where does the learning come in there? The web is not is assembled nowadays. It's not authored anymore. We don't write by hand. Again, HTTP archive, 27% of websites are 90 to 99% third-party content. Third-party content comes with slowness. This is basically another great resource that shows you how much third-party services make your website slow, and you don't even know that they've been used because some business person put that into a WordPress plugin that you didn't even know it gets loaded. And it creates a mess. The web has become a render target amongst other things. It's not really the thing that we write by hand any longer, and we probably shouldn't. But at the same time, we shouldn't just throw the kitchen sink at it and hope everything works. Releasing often and developer convenience trumps semantics and performance of the final product. You got it out the door. Thank you. You can go to the bar now. And like the end users are suffering. Websites are slow and huge because we work on fast computers and connections. We don't test it on like shitty environments like bad mobile phones. Dylan, who's going to be at the .NET event here in a few months as well, Chris just posted that. He's like, when you do a create React app, my React app, it's 1.5 million lines of code that is created by somebody in their free time, and you have no idea what they are. It's 1.5 million lines of code that you start with that are not yours, but you're in control. You are actually to blame if those things go wrong. So do you feel okay that this is good for accessibility, interoperability, performance, and security? You have to. There's no other way around it nowadays, it seems. So let's talk tools. And I know I'm over time, but so I'm going to go quickly through it, because we heard about a few of these things before today. Browser tool audits, audits in Chrome, Lighthouse, wonderful thing. You just go through a website and it tells you like the performance, accessibility issues, best practices, which is like a weird thing, and SEO, and it even gives you a video of how fast it rendered and what you can do to actually click through and get the information out there. Accessibility Insights is something we released 3 days ago together with Deki, or Diki, or whatever you call them. It's a browser extension for Chrome or a Windows app, depending on what you want to test. It's an open source collaboration, and it's community driven with GitHub as the communication channel. And it's customized to your bug reporting tool. So what does that mean? When you have it installed as an extension, you have a fast pass, an assessment, or ad hoc tools. The fast pass just runs through your thing, much like Lighthouse does, and gives you an accessibility review of what's wrong in your website. The audit is something that you need. The assessment is something that you click through and you make a proper report. If you, for example, build a government website, or you build a website that needs to abide to other accessibility guidelines. The fast pass does it quickly and tells you your color contrast is rubbish, your frame title doesn't have a title, your link names are not there. You can also have it interactively. So you say the automated checks, you turn them on, and you can color on headings, landmarks, and that overlays the things on your website and tells you where everything is wrong. So in this case, it finds that the link name here doesn't have a link in it because the image doesn't have an alternative text. And you see there's a button called File Issue. So if you set up your repository or your continuous integration there, you can file an issue on your product from that extension to the browser. And that's pretty much nice to actually see something and get it quickly done. Elements must have sufficient color contrast as well. You can see that man is unhappy because of all of these bugs. You also have a visualization of the tab order in the page. So if somebody cannot use a mouse or cannot see, they tab through things. So you have a graph that goes like it says like, okay, here's how you put people in a circle when they want to navigate somewhere, or here it makes sense to actually tab from one to the other. You can turn off the colors to see if there's any color blindness problems. But the issue with a few of them is that they're actually great for a preset, but they're not customizable. So having information isn't enough, and having these systems isn't enough when people don't go there, when you probably haven't used any of them yet. So what's the point of that? So we need to prevent mistakes before they happen. And that's a weird one, but I think this is so cool. As our tooling is written in JavaScript, Visual Studio Code is written in TypeScript. Browser extensions are written in TypeScript. Things are open source and available. We can move all that knowledge that we have into our development chain. We need to allow people to customize these experiences. If your company doesn't care about PWA, then a report from Lighthouse might tell you like, oh, you've done something bad, and your boss will keep asking you what's going on rather than like understanding that this is not important to you. So let's target editors and build processes. I love that editors have linting built in now and testing built in. My CSS has become much better since Visual Studio Code keeps telling me you're doing stupid things here. Don't do these things. Webhint.io is another system that does something similar. It helps with performance, accessibility, PWA readiness, the tooling setup that you have, interoperability, and security. All of these things are automatically tested by Webhint. So you can go through the website. I put the forward days in there, and it found like 12 security errors. It found like compatibility errors, PWA errors, and so on and so forth. In comparison to Lighthouse, what you can do here is you can turn these things off and say like, I don't think that's a mistake because our business doesn't need that, so don't put that in the report, please. You can edit the experience to your build process because it's not only a website, it's actually an NPM module. So the web interface is not good enough because it doesn't scale to production. So why not add the best practices as part of the build deployment process? So you can put it as a setup of your bundler, it can test your bundler setup and your preprocessor to avoid huge release sizes. And this is how it is. You just npx hint example.com and then it does the testing on the command line for you as part of your build script that actually gives you these errors and stops the build from happening when these errors are there. Customize the tests. If you know what the product needs are, you can turn them off. You can also do things like make sure every footer has a picture of a leprechaun in it. You can write whatever tests you want, and you can create these with the CLI wizard, npm create hint rc, and that one gives you a 5-step process what kind of test to add to your suite. And you can run this behind a firewall. You can run this on your own machine. You have no third-party dependencies except for some of the security and accessibility tests. But the tests that you write yourself, you can run behind your firewall. And why not put this in the code? So there's an extension for the code editor as well that does these things live while you're doing it. So when you, for example, create a manifest, it tells you the background color shouldn't be in that format. That's an invalid manifest while you're writing it. It prevents you from making the mistake, much like Grammarly makes you a better writer because it shows you errors while you're doing them. In case of the setting up your Webpack, it tells you like you have ES3 here for older browsers, but they're actually getting ES5 right now. So if you set this up, your bundle will be much, much smaller. And of course, accessibility, this image must have an alternative text, should be in there as well while you're typing it. So in summary, the web is a mess. And we're to blame. Me 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you today and tomorrow when you say like, this is good enough. Nobody's gonna fire me for that. Nobody cares more about the web than we do. So we should be the people who actually take ourselves to a higher standard. We're to blame, but often we can't change what is there. We cannot change what is the system that somebody else has built. But when you start something new, think about performance, security, and accessibility up front, not how easy it is for me to do this thing. We should not repeat the same mistakes of the past. And we have the tooling to apply the accumulated knowledge inside our code editors, inside our build scripts. You don't need to spend hours and hours going on the web reading this stuff up. You can actually get error messages while you're writing your code, and that way you're building better things. And this is a great way to learn and will lead to a better web if we do it the right way. Embrace the tooling that we have nowadays and think about what you're actually building and what it does to humans, not how fast it is out there and if you use the coolest, newest technology. And that's all I had, so thank you very much. Now go drinking. I think. I'll be around.
So? Are we doing a Q&A?
I don't know. You said I'm the last thing and people go drinking afterwards, which is a normal reaction to my talks.
So, if anyone has some questions?
Okay. We can do that too.
Not really. You did everything very well.
Thank you, Chris, very much.
Okay.
Oh, there's
so
one.
we have one question.
There's one person. There's always one.
Two.
I have a question about what you're thinking about. You're thinking about that the web is forgiveness, that HTML specifically is very forgiveness, and that was the reason why XHTML has failed. So, do you think that initial design of such forgiveness is a mistake, or it's okay, it's good, and each attempt to push XHTML was a mistake?
trying to push XHTML without understanding what people are doing on the web was a mistake. It was a very academic exercise. It was like, this is in the perfect world, this is how it should be. But in the web world, where we used third-party content back then already, that's where XHTML started to break. It's the same we have now with JSON. Like JSON compared to XML and XSL schemas, where you can validate your data before you actually use it. In JSON schemas, we haven't gone that far because, again, XML became far too complex for its own good. We tried to simplify things, and I think if we tried nowadays to do something like XHTML, no chance whatsoever. We tried things like CSP, and we tried things like making JavaScript ad safe and making JavaScript only a subset of JavaScript, so there's no way to do like drive-by downloads and these kind of things, and people didn't care either. The web is meant for anybody to put anything there that is possible, and the technologies of the web are forgiving, so that's something we have to live with. It's not an excuse for us, though, to be sloppy. It still makes sense to actually write something. I write full sentences when I talk to people on Messenger, and I finish my sentences with a full stop. That's not because it's necessary, that's just because I feel better if I've done that and I showed respect for the person that I talk to. And the same way we should show respect to our end users by writing code that is not full of security bugs or like possible things that the browser has to fix for them. Because no matter how we optimize the browser, if the browser has to fix things for you, that's always a performance issue.
So it was a mistake, but we need to live with it, right?
It was a mistake. It's just an organically grown thing. The web is not a software platform like any other. The web is a medium where people publish. And they publish in all kinds of ways. So making a technology there that is very strict is against the whole concept of it. And again, it's just a matter of like, what do you do with this freedom? Do you use this freedom to make sure that old things don't break? Or do you use this freedom to build things nowadays that are still breaking and the browser should do it for you? And I think we shouldn't be that lazy. We get paid money for that kind of stuff.
Okay, the last rephrase. If there would not be that legacy and the web would be designed today, it would be more like XHTML or again as a HTML?
If global warming weren't a thing, how would we put cars on the road nowadays? We're dealing with the situation right now. I've never been that academic about inventing things, but if I think about what we should do with the web nowadays, it should be something that is much more component-based and much more a proper rendering environment than just something that is split into 12 different technologies. I wish that the technologies would align more. That's why I'm getting angry when people use only JavaScript or only CSS. The best things we do is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together, all used for their different powers. So I'm excited about things like WebAssembly. I'm very excited about things like WebGL, that we actually can do GL rendering in the web. So I love that new technologies come to it that are much more stricter than HTML is for special purpose needs. But I don't think that you could have had anything growing that fast and that important like the web with a technology that would be stricter than what we have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.